Hello, and welcome to Cornwall Woman, where I get to talk to some of the most fascinating women in Cornwall. In this episode, I'm meeting Yasmine Fosu. She's a political activist, a world-class fencing champion, and is studying international politics at the University of Exeter's campus in Penryn. She's also one of the coordinators of this summer's Black Lives Matter protests in Truro.
So what I'm really hoping is for Cornish politicians and people in positions of authority and power to recognise how many people are supportive of the Black Lives Matter movement. Even though there are very few minority persons in Cornwall, they still deserve the same standard of living as other people. We contribute to the community, we pay taxes, so we deserve to be represented in education, in history, being taught to students so that it doesn't impact our lives in these negative ways daily.
I'd like to have met up with Yasmine in one of Falmouth's many lovely cafes, but lockdown left us skulking around the back streets of the town to find a safe and quiet spot. Yasmine told me that she was all set to study law at a prestigious university up country, but after a visit to Cornwall, life turned an unexpected corner.
I came to Boardmasters Festival and I really wasn't happy with the university that I was meant to go to before, and someone that I'd gone to the festival with's mother actually worked at the university down here. So I came and took a look and just decided absolutely that I wanted to come to the University of Exeter campus in Penryn. I absolutely fell in love with it. It seemed like the students just had such a healthy work-life balance and approach to holistic learning, and I really appreciated that the campus was shared with creative arts students as well. So I really wanted to be somewhere that I could have a part-time job and I could meet people who are doing different things and studying the arts, and so that's what I really enjoyed about it. I went to school in Somerset before, so I just didn't do the Southwest. I think I've grown to love it more than the part that it played in my decision, but obviously no one's going to complain that they've got a view of the ocean from their bedroom window.
And let's start by talking about your fencing. You really are one of the best, aren't you? So how did you get started?
So I actually got started when I was around 13. I did athletics, but I was a bit short for athletics. And when I was at school, one of the fencing coaches at my school had come to watch one of the athletics meets. He asked me if I was interested in taking up or trying fencing. So I tried it and I did one competition and did quite well, and then was scouted by another coach and offered a scholarship to the school that I then attended.
You kind of got up the ladder of great fencers fairly quickly, didn't you? So where are you at now?
So at the moment I hold 9 continental championship medals. I've competed at 4 world championships and other World Cup events as well, and my highest ranking was I was in the top 30 in the world for under 20s. When I was 17, that's when I was at my peak training.
That's amazing.
So I'm the most decorated female of my age in the continent, yeah.
Wow. And when you say the continent isn't Europe?
No, continent's Africa.
So tell me about that decision when you were getting to the level where you could compete internationally.
So I went to the 2012 Olympics to watch the fencing, and before that there was all this hype around the Olympics, especially as it was being held in London, of course, and something that I was a bit troubled by was how I was reading about Mo Farah as he'd become one of the post boys of the Olympics. But I read in quite a few articles that he was described as Somalian primarily, and British kind of as an afterthought. And when you're 13 in fencing, you can opt to change out of wherever you're domestically naturally going to represent and choose a nationality from either of your parents. And then afterwards, Mo Farah, after he won his gold medals,
for the UK?
Yeah, for the UK, then he was written about as British. And that was something that I really didn't want to happen to me. I didn't want it to be that I was Ghanaian or Iranian before I was British if I was representing the UK, and I didn't want my respect and support of me as an athlete to rest upon my success, because every athlete has bad days and I didn't want to just be alienated if that were the case. And so I really just wanted to represent somewhere that I wouldn't feel excluded or othered by unless I delivered.
So are you saying that you would have felt more exposed as a woman of Ghanaian descent if you were representing the UK?
I don't want to speak about about British fencing in particular. They've always been like really great and supportive and everything. I've never experienced any racism from them as an organisation, but it's just something that I feel like minority athletes in this country are susceptible and vulnerable to, and I just really didn't want that to be the case with me, especially that I think that there was an special threat of it compared to a sport like athletics in fencing, because fencing was such a privileged and white sport.
How did your coaches feel about that decision? I bet they were disappointed, weren't they?
I don't think so.
To lose somebody of such calibre.
A coach just wants you to do well at the end of the day, and whether you're flying the Ghanaian flag or the British flag, if they're the coach that's behind you and you're winning, I think that's the thing that really speaks most for them.
So apart from being a top class student and an international level fencer, you're also an activist, and one of your first projects was here in Falmouth, wasn't it?
Yeah, Feed Falmouth was a project, an initiative that I started linked with one of my university lecturers who supported me, James Muldoon, because food banks in Falmouth and Penryn have had massive, and also just UK-wide, have had massive shortages in the food supply to them, because there's also been like an escalated risk of homelessness and more vulnerable people than ever in need of food and resources. And that's especially a big problem in Cornwall, because there's a lot of seasonal homeless people who travel down. Cornwall has one of the lowest incomes and the highest, and is a county with one of the highest rates of homelessness as well. And so my project aimed to link local businesses with food banks, so that at the end of their days they donate whatever leftover food there is directly to the food bank, and also to lower the food wastage of edible food.
Amazing. And have you any idea how many people you've helped? How's it been tracked, the success of it?
So with my initiative, 7 businesses have agreed to participate in it for a 5-year period, and then maybe longer upon review.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
That's incredible. That's really a long time.
Yeah.
If you think about how many people will be going hungry during that period of time.
Yeah, and it was something that I was really quite proud of, because from my perspective, I always took things from a very humanitarian perspective, and my boyfriend, he's studying renewable energy engineering, and so he's brought a lot of knowledge about sustainability. And so I was really pleased to come up with something that linked the two, because obviously there's massive greenhouse gas emissions associated with the production of food, which then goes on to be wasted just because it's not purchased. And so I was just really pleased that businesses were actually willing to participate in it.
So this summer you had what sounds to me like an epiphany after the killing of George Floyd.
Yeah, when I saw the video of George Floyd's murder, actually, it troubled me more than any of the others that I'd seen. I was really, really deeply saddened and hurt, and I think it shook the world as a whole. And it was a call of action, but for a lot of people. But for me specifically, it really highlighted that in the past, my acceptance and respect was largely contingent on my success, in a way that
as a fencer and academically.
Yeah, exactly. And I was really disappointed to see that people that I worked with and people from my circles and who I'd gone to school with were sharing things with racist sentiment behind them. And when I spoke to them, a lot of people were just unwilling to engage and learn about it, and so I had to sever a lot of ties. And with the isolation provided by Corona, I just felt really isolated and alienated in a way that I haven't before.
So you actually gave up some of your old friendships when you saw these people for what they really were?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's a really difficult thing for people to do, and I think a lot of people of colour don't do it because there's such a failure in education to provide the history of like Britain's colonial history, for example, or the history of slavery, that what is actually racism is so widespread, and that it's not just the really overt and graphic and horrible racism that you're presented with in the media. and you're told like this is racist and this is bad. There's a lot of microaggressions and things like that behind it, but as a person of colour you experience them so daily and so regularly that you kind of become desensitized, or not desensitized to them, but desensitized to being called to act on them. And as well, a lot of it for me felt like, oh, I'll just suck it up and I won't cause a scene, and the next and then I'll make it to the next stage and I'll gain this new respect, and then I'll be able to make more positive change than if I did something now. And kind of it suppresses your voice and gets a lot of people of colour to constantly think that when they reach the point on the horizon, then they'll be able to make more positive change, when really it's not like that, because you'll never reach that point. You just need to act now. And that's kind of what I realised, that I needed to cut the ties with people that I'd gone to school with, people who potentially could have had family connections, that could have given me internships, things like this, but you have to sacrifice those and make a stand at a certain point.
And what was your experience of moving to Cornwall? Because I don't really know what it's like in Somerset, but it's clearly quite white here.
So I experienced the most frequent racism of my life when I moved down to Cornwall. And I'm not entirely sure why this was the case, but I never actually felt fear for my safety. And I think that that's largely because I'm a female, and so while I have like heightened risk of like sexual violence and things like that, like physical violence with racism motive was not something that I was directly threatened by as much as like my male counterpart would be. And so I felt safe here. I have my like white partner who unfortunately, and it shouldn't be the case, has acted as a shield for me in many situations. But I just put these experiences of racism down to failure of education, it being a very white area, and I never really took much chance on acting on them. I had a few disappointing experiences where I tried to report them, and they were judged by white people in positions of authority to not be racist enough, is that no action was really taken. And I didn't want there to be punishment, I just wanted there to be an understanding of the failure of education, and that a lot of people make it to university and still hold these misled preconceptions about
supposedly already educated people.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm privileged enough to have reached the point of university, and then they're getting given a degree to go and potentially disseminate these ideas further with whatever qualification they now hold. And the university really has an obligation and a role to play in continuing or being pioneering, I think is the case, education in racism. And so I kind of got into a mindset of just putting up with racism when really no one should have to.
And what kind of things, if you don't mind me asking, what were the incidences that you felt should be reported?
So people using racist slurs on the bus, people making like monkey noises and dog noises when they saw me, like quite bad stuff. One time I was at a bar and there was this man who was really drunk, and he was kind of harassing this young girl, and so I said like, oh, I think maybe you're a bit drunk and should go home. And then again he like racially abused me. I work in a bar, and sometimes like people have said racist things when I've been at work and things like that as well.
That sounds pretty bad to me.
Yeah, it has been pretty bad, but I think when you're exposed to the racism and police brutality happening in the States, it kind of makes you feel like, well, at least I came out alive, which shouldn't be the case.
But that's such a high bar, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And so I was trying to play my part in addressing racism. I put together a catalogue of student experiences of racism in Cornwall, and I also have friends in Bath and Bristol universities who've said that they're interested in making it kind of a trilogy series, and also it showcases minority students' arts and things like that, like a magazine, but it's like a catalogue to try and raise awareness. But at the moment I'm working with the university to instate a tackling racism training program for incoming first year students that they will have to take, because I just thought it's not enough has been enough.
That's very proactive and taking on an awful lot of responsibility on top of everything else that you do. But that's very interesting that you've come to this realisation about your own experiences and done something really potentially massive that could hopefully educate hundreds of people, if not thousands, in years to come. That's quite a legacy, actually.
Thank you so much. I really hope it is like a self-sustained training program, because obviously I don't want it to just die out, be a tick box now in the current climate, and then die out once I leave. And that's what I'm really working with the organisation RJ Working to ensure that it can be properly followed up and continued.
And on top of that, of course, you are one of the co-organisers of the Black Lives Matter protests in Truro.
Yes, I co-organised with Elise Marsh, and we were so pleased, and anyone who's listening to this that was there, thank you so much for coming. It was really amazing. It was emotionally draining, but fantastic, and for a really good cause, and thank you so much.
What are you hoping that will come out of these protests? Because as you say, you mentioned tick box exercises, and I'm sure there are plenty of those. What change do you want to see in Cornwall?
So what I'm really hoping is for Cornish politicians and people in positions of authority and power to recognise how many people are supportive of the Black Lives Matter movement, and that it is something that needs to be addressed, that despite even though there are very few minority persons in Cornwall, they still deserve the same standard of living as other people, and there has to be some sort of equity or equality delivered to those people. We contribute to the community, we pay taxes, so we deserve to be represented in education, in history, being taught to students, so that it doesn't impact our lives in these negative ways daily, because they really chip away at people. And I'm really thankful for the wave of protests that have happened, but it's led to a lot of tokenistic acts. So things on TV being taken down because they've been labelled as offensive, when really it was just someone wearing a mud mask was something I saw the other day. And it's not those kinds of gestures that minority people need. We don't care about someone wearing a clay face mask in a TV programme. What we want is to be represented in education. We want it to be our equality to be respected and reflected in statistics from police, and for example with the health reports that came out from COVID of minority people being far more likely to die, in the similarly in birth rates of black women, much higher death rate. And it's all those things that we really hope can be taken and addressed at a governmental level from this, not the day by day random memes or this or that or anything. We don't really mind, that's not something that will make meaningful change to our lives.
You're also trying to tackle historical representations or lack of them in terms of the petition that you've started, that you're going to submit to the National Trust about Tregnwainton and the fact that it was built on slave money.
Yeah, so Tregnwainton Garden was built by the Price family, funded by their involvement in the slave trade, and I really wanted the National Trust to create a memorial or a plaque to remember the slaves who's lost their lives and lost their freedom in the slave trade, to fund projects like that, like the gardens, because from my perspective the gardens will still be equally beautiful. People will not stop going if it's remembered and attention's drawn to the sinister past of the finances behind it. And I think that most or all people would agree at this point that slavery is a really bad stain on the British history, and stains like that are an embarrassment for British history shouldn't just be ignored. They should be highlighted so they're not relived, and the people who suffered at the hands of people in positions of power during those times should be remembered. They deserve to have their lives remembered for what they gave up, what they sacrificed, and what was taken from them, more importantly. And so that's something that I'm really hoping the National Trust will support and get behind.
Fingers crossed. National Trust, listen up. And it seems to me, this is obviously some way off yet, but it seems to me that you have so many skills and talents and conviction and your proactive approach to life. Have you thought what you want to do when you finish studying?
My end goal has always been to work for a humanitarian agency, particularly Médecins Sans Frontières. And so something that I'd really enjoy doing is actually being a field worker or a field researcher. so that I can contribute to how conflicts and areas of crisis are understood, rather than being a missionary or so that goes and delivers equipment that may not actually help the problem.
That sounds incredible.
That's what I'm hoping to do.
That sounds amazingly useful. Amazing. So I ask all of my Cornwall women this question. Do you have a favourite place in Cornwall?
My favourite place in Cornwall has to be the Secret Beach in Falmouth, which is just past Swanpool. I don't know what it's actually called. But that's somewhere that I really love. My boyfriend and I wild camped out there just under the stars, just two of us in my sleeping bag last year, and that is my favourite place, like, maybe in the world.
What does being a Cornwall woman mean to you?
I think that being a Cornwall woman, something that I've realised in Cornwall is that there's a really great sense of community. Like, even with the racism that I've experienced, the community heart in Cornwall is like so strong, and there's such a sense of Cornish identity. And I think that the thing with being a Cornwall woman is that you have to be willing to be open and have that sense of community identity, and I think a love of nature comes with it. I'm not really sure if that's something that other people have said, but it's definitely something that I've been exposed to, is that a lot of people here really care about nature, really care about the planet, and really care about each other. So
Yes, they do. It was great to meet Yasmine. She's such an impressive woman who's already made such an impact in so many ways. She's really got the courage of her convictions. I did contact the National Trust to get their views on the petition, and they told me that they're working on making some of these painful and challenging histories more visible to visitors. So watch this space. In the next episode of Cornwall Woman, I'm talking to skateboard coach Cora Stocker. I'd like to say she taught me a few tricks, but sadly not. But I loved hearing her thought-provoking ideas about public space, the meaning of radical culture, and why falling down can be a good thing.
You have to fall over to achieve anything in skateboarding. There's no avoiding it, and I think people should fall over more often. It's good for you. Embarrass ourselves every now and again. Yeah.
So subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to this now to hear Cora and the other inspiring women of Cornwall who I've spoken to so far. And please rate this podcast, leave me a comment or share it with a friend. And keep in touch on @CornwallWoman on Twitter and Instagram. These podcasts have been made with the help of a Cultivator Creative Investment Grant funded by the European Regional Development Fund, Arts Council England and Cornwall Council. The theme music is by Cornwall composer House of Hiss. Thank you for listening.